The midfield pressing, that's a bit of the focus now, which I've come up with to make some trends clear. Guided inwards temporized, guided inwards active, guiding outwards temporized, guiding outwards active. And where is the difference? What's behind it? In my view, the very important points are that you can play the pressing very active, but also waiting. You have to be variable, you have to see how the opponent acts, that you are not necessarily always hungry for the ball, but always stay away at the right moment, show rooms and sometimes wait and see what happens there. I would like to explain this briefly because I believe that an inward or outward directed active pressing is 90 minutes hard for the team to keep up because this is a very run-intensive story. First of all, I would like to shed light on inward directed or inward controlled midfield pressing. There are the rough sequences. The classics that we know so well, that's the way we imagine it. Ball is played to the fullback, outside midfielder approaches, and in the right figure an imagined pass here onto the 6 that we double there accordingly and correspondingly win the balls. That is the basic idea, to direct inwards in order to get possession there accordingly. Playing it temporized, I let it run first with a slightly faster frequency. I also do not comment on it at first, but we just look at the processes. Ideal, of course, when the ball transitioned, that's how it's supposed to be. We come to it now and look now in slow motion. What happens there? And now I'll comment on that a bit more. I'll stop here. The two strikers are staggered, you see that, but only play staggered when the two opposing centre-backs, as you can see here, are relatively close to them. If the two centre-backs of the opponent are even deeper, it makes no sense to take this staggered position. That, they can stay side by side. If they are still 20-25 yards further away, they will not play a ball so fast through the two strikers. And that is the goal of this story. By this staggered position, one would like to achieve that the opponent does not play into the centre so fast. Here you can see no running out of the ball near forward here, but a waiting game. I'll show it clearly again when the ball comes. He does not come out, he puts the centre back a bit, waits until the pass comes, and then immediately orients himself backwards. The outside midfielder, in this case this one here, closes the line, directs inwards, and it ideally requires a doubling with these two players here. It's the opportunity here for the second striker to stay deep, to instantly have quick, deep attacking open men at a ball win, as it is now made clear here. So the 2-on-1 situation is now achieved over the ball near striker. It is pleasant for the strikers, it is not so much running work, so they have the option not to push through completely. These are short distances. But of course it is played temporized. The back pass will not be covered and, well, that's a pressing behaviour which is not necessarily primarily oriented to win the ball, but maybe a little bit more on. We defend the goal, keep the opponent away from the goal. Basically a good option. I want to offer it again, a third time to comment it again. Just pay attention to the two strikers, slightly staggered, the ball comes through, also there, slight tilting, the ball near forward will now fall out with the pass backwards. The ball distant striker does not have to push through, has only a short path, and the ball near forward is the one who is on it. Again, of course, important that the 6, here in this case it's this player here, is not too close at his opponent so that there really is an offer that this ball is played. Because if he covers that completely, the opposing defender will probably not play the ball. By the striker which stays away, you have here then directly a way to play immediately into the depth and then initiate a counter-attack accordingly. This was the temporized midfield pressing. With this waiting midfield pressing, you can also, I'll talk about that later on, also hide many things as well. All the opponent's game strategies are quickly, you have an answer there. If you start too early with active pressing start with approaching, directing, controlling, I certainly have. If it works, more pressure on the opponent, maybe more control over the game with the opponent, but there are also great dangers that the opponent, because he also has his plan, can play himself out of our pressing. So from that point of view, I recommend to defend rather temperate, wait and see, and use the active situational, and if the situation is favorable, then actively play the whole thing accordingly. And that's what I want to show in the next animation, an active pressing. So that means now, pay attention to the ball near striker. He approaches, you can see it here. You take him out, the second forward pushes through, and there is a doubling between the ball distance striker and the 6. I'll go into this animation again. So here, you can see here this tilted behavior of the strikers, quite normal. And I always say to my strikers, if you want to play it actively, the 2 opposing centre backs, as here, must not be far away. They are relatively close to you. And I always say, attack the pass, attack the pass. The ball has just been played, you can see that, and that's a good signal for the ball distance striker to start because the striker now has time. Until the centre-back gets the ball, the striker has time to approach him and create pressure on him immediately to put him in a real pressure situation. And that is, you can see that clearly here, he's done well here now, he has recognised the situation, attacked the pass as I always say, and isolated the player, the central defender, so that the centre-back is barely able to play back to the other centre-back. Now of course it is important that the ball distant forward, this player, moves up accordingly because he is now equal to this player, who is then the corresponding player who's supposed to double attack. That's why it's a long way to go for this player, that's clear. He has to go into these spaces at times, that's what, nobody does that for 90 minutes. And especially against teams that know by now the play inward directed pressing, they also have a strategy against that. There is this change of this internally controlled active pressing and waiting pressing recommended. So I would always do this mix, recommend mixing both styles, that one says situational, we make it rather active, the directing of the forwards. Of course, it is also important to give commands from the back, also to push up the players. Ideal if that is a connection, that a defensive, a central player gives the commands, but the striker has to give the impulse, because when from behind is shouted to the front, run striker, then the situation is over. So the striker has to recognise a bit the situation. And starting points or clues are, the central defenders are not so far away and attack the pass. These are, I think, very important orientations for the strikers. What is still important here, you can see this here, I've said that before, this player must not be too far out, not too far in, much deeper than the fullback, because only then does he have the chance to approach the fullback in such a way that he directs him inside. The ball near 6 has to be close there, in case that a pass comes to this player, that he can then put pressure on immediately, that the signal is coming here, we do not want this one, rather this one, that we provoke this pass more. Of course, it does not always work either, so I know, but if he plays out now, we have a good basic situation to be able to play pressing. I'll let it run again and then stop again at the crucial moment. We were until here, now it comes again, this inward controlled pressing, you can see the ball now comes inwards, ball distance striker and doubling the 6. And that's what we saw at the end. The interesting story that you can move up the outside midfielder here, that makes sense. I'll go in there for a moment, we want to see that again, because that's also a very important detail when you play it actively. Here I am again, here you can stop well. Basically, if he has the ball, he has to look for other solutions. And if this player has moved in here, this player may be open if he comes 2-3 steps closer. Sure, this is a risky ball, but there are now many players who can play the ball and who play it. If you move up the ball distant wing player until here, he will not get the idea to play this pass. This is a hara-kiri ball that he can attack immediately. If active, then please like that, makes sense. If you let him shift inwards, of course you'll have to live with this ball, is also a possibility. Then this happens, what we've just seen, falling back diagonally, because there we cannot create any pressure. That's the ball, I like to call it an anti-pressing ball, where the opponent can escape the pressing. But here in this situation, it is difficult. So now you can attack at every situation pretty well, even if he does not play the desired ball, but here may be a row further, because he comes in or he comes. You have short distances everywhere, you get into double defending situations very quickly, and I think you are perfectly organised. And I would also recommend to move up the outer player, which also brings benefits. You can see that in the continuation of the game. I'll let it run through just another time. You can see this in the continuation of the game, that he is then, logically, also a possible target player when transitioning quickly. Here comes the win of the ball, and now the ball directly onto the ball distance, which enters is a wonderful counter-attacking situation that can evolve from that. We come once again to this behavior again in slow motion one last time. I want to work out the most important points again. Attacking the pass, you can see it now, striker is approaching, the bow is not too big, trying to isolate the second centre back, ball near 6, he's very close, outside winger, you see, first to the line, then trying to approach like you see it now and create a bit of pressure. Pushing through the second forward, moving up the outer midfielder, and then ideally entering a 2-on-1 situation. And then logically, once you've won the ball, exploiting the situation by a quick transition, counter-attack. I'll come to a few error patterns, especially with this story. As here, both strikers at the same height, when the centre-backs are close by, it's relatively easy to play through the strikers. If the ball distant forward is only slightly offset backwards, this ball is very difficult to play. So make sure that the forward's position staggered. That makes sense, it tightens and closes the centre well. On the right side, as you often see, a striker is too hungry, approaches too early. Retrieving is an important point. If it does not work, you just have to swallow it a bit. Two options here. Either we allow it or we move up from behind, of course, that would be an answer as well. And now we're already talking about attacking pressing. The striker runs out too early, you can see that. The 6 has so much space here through these pass sequences. Sure, you can say a CM must go out and attack now, but then a 6 is off the chain. So, one is, it adds up a bit, it's always a bit problematic if that's not well coordinated. One goes forward, the rest stays, does not work. If then as a team come back forward, so that one always keeps little distances between the team parts. I had already hinted at a few things about the wing players. If he is too far out like here, the corridor is open here. Alright? He would have to go further inwards. If he's too far inside, he has little chance of putting pressure on the fullback. So it is good, important that he finds a good balance of holding the centre, but also of moving inwards by also being able to create pressure on the outside at the same time and cover the line. If he's too far forward like this, and the ball is coming slightly into the forward motion, the fullback dribbles it away. So, an inward directed pressing is hardly possible. It's possible to direct outwards, that's fine, but it's hard to get inside. So position much deeper, just about here, that's a good position. If he was standing too deep like this, maybe even deeper, I'll draw him back even deeper, then he has little access. But I always say rather a bit deeper than too high, because I can still control the approaching behavior quite well and direct the opponent into a particular space. For after to the approaching outside, a few tips. It is important, you have to look here where the outer midfielder is positioned, that's why I have this player still inside. If this one is somewhere in space, that player does not need to make the bow that big. I experienced that again and again, you can see it in practice. The outer player goes inwards and he still makes this giant bow, and then it is still easy to pass to him. So maybe he has to look for eye contact first, then look over the shoulder for a moment, whereas the outer midfielder, and then run the bow accordingly, that this long line ball is not possible to play, and then of course try to build up pressure. But of course, and there are also many mistakes made, do not be too hungry, do not attack too wild, find the backward movement at the right time. There are many players, that's my personal experience, having trouble making that step forward. The fullback here who gets the ball moves inwards with the first touch, and the outer midfielder runs into the emptiness. And that's an important point. I always say to my outer midfielders, run forward as long as the ball is rolling. But is the ball close? Not if he already has it near the fullback. And I always say 2-3 yards away, then you have to cancel your forward run and slowly get into the backward movement, so you will not be played off with a simple receivement of the ball. So these are very important details, because with this approaching, everything starts basically. If he pulls in here now and runs away, the whole pressing is leave it out. And that is a very small detail, and that should be later. And so we also, in the last part, where it comes to training forms, that should be trained specifically. Here are some more details when doubling. There are always two parts, one part, the one from behind, and one that creates pressure from the front. I always say the one who is closer to the goal is the one who's acting a bit waitingly. I always say distance, arm length, basketball distance, some coaches say as well. Acting carefully, waiting, this player, while the second player is really actively pressing here and trying to apply pressure on the ball, so that this player really tries to turn and that the rear play then maybe can win the ball. These are such important details when doubling because there you can create a nice 2-on-1 situation, but if you do not get possession of the ball because both play cautiously or both attack too wild, that is unfavorable. I always say the deeper player towards the goal is more cautious. The one acting further away from the goal is really the one who can also put more pressure on and has to put.
Graphics and animations in this video were made with Easy Sports Graphics and Easy Animation, used by over 40,000 coaches worldwide. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. New soccer videos every Tuesday and Thursday.